It was a failure of the Ethereum ecosystem to graduate from purely developer-focused mindset into this user-focused mindset.
What made a difference out of all the wallets for Phantom to become the most used wallet in crypto in 3 years?
That's a good question. Well,
Brandon Millman, the co-founder and CEO of Phantom.
The most popular crypto wallet with more than 15 million monthly active users.
You go as far as to say that Revolut and Robinhood just can't compete with Phantom.
Centralized exchanges, they made the right choice at the time that they were built. Raw blockchain was very difficult to use. Now, the number of tokens appearing on chain is exploding. And so if they're not able to transform themselves, they're not going to be able to compete.
Why did you choose to focus on Solana specifically?
Solana was actually the number 2 biggest deployment of USDC. At that point, both Raj and Anatoly were Silicon Valley based. When we met them for the first time, their ethos and commitment to pragmatism was basically well aligned with the way that we think about technology and we think about building products.
You said you worked at Twitter for 4 years?
Cutting my teeth at building mobile apps, learning what true product and user experience is at hundreds of millions of people. It's such a weird thing that in crypto, the state of the art of customer support is like, hey, go to the Discord. At Phantom, we had proven customer support models and everything. It was just having a very user-centric mindset.
Your handle on Twitter is bchillman. How chill are you?
I'm pretty chill on the outside, but on the inside.
What's happening on the inside? Are you happy? 69% of the people who watch this podcast have not subscribed. If you enjoy this show, if it provides value to you in one way, shape, or form, can I please ask you a little favor? Can you click that subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment down below? It helps this show more than you can imagine. My goal is to bring the absolute biggest and brightest people on this channel, and the best way to get there is to have all of us rally together and build the When Shift Happens family. Thank you. This conversation is supported by Jupiter, the most used decentralized trading platform on Solana and the largest DAO in the world. Bitwise Asset Management, the crypto specialist asset manager with more than $10 billion in client assets and more than 30 crypto solutions across ETFs, index funds, alpha strategies, staking, and more. 3. A scalable layer 1 blockchain that's fast, secure, and affordable, built by previous Facebook developers, and that delivers the benefits of Web3 with the ease of Web2. And Mental, an Ethereum layer 2 that built 2 products I particularly like. FBTC, which enables you to borrow and lend Bitcoin in DeFi, and METH or METH, one of the largest ETH liquid staking protocols in crypto. Okay, sweet. Whoopla. I think we're good.
Okay, sounds good.
We're always good, always ready.
Thanks for the coffee.
Pleasure. So I realized, I think we got introduced by Hunter and Yano
They
separately.
Yeah.
And then it didn't work. And then I think
You just
then I
DM'd me,
just I was like,
I saw, well, I kind of had their emails sitting in my inbox for a bit, and I was like, and then,
well, you have a trillion emails, so
but yeah, thanks for the patience.
oh man, that's my what I do. I just chase people. I mean, that's what we all do, right? We just like chase, make sure people do their thing, make sure people answer. For me, I'm here for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So I actually try to line up a lot of people, but everybody I'm trying to line up is very busy, right? So yeah.
Glad we could find some time. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Amazing. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good. Yeah. A bit chilly today, but yeah, sun came out and yeah, feeling good overall.
If you had to summarize what it is you do and why you do it, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in summary, building the world's best crypto wallet, next gen consumer finance platform. And yeah, the reason we're doing it is basically to accelerate the adoption of crypto, specifically by making it safe and easy to use. I think basically as an industry, we're all sort of playing our part towards this general mission of accelerating the adoption of crypto and all contributing our specific strengths. And yeah, believe that my personal strength and the strength of our team is to help basically solve the problem of usability of crypto and making it safe and easy to use.
Why do we need to accelerate the adoption of crypto?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Well, I mean, it all comes back to basically the blueprint that Satoshi set out in the original Bitcoin white paper. There's a couple different reasons. One is to increase the access of financial systems across everyone in the world. Crypto is basically the first time that uh, anyone in the world with an internet connection can access the financial system. Um, and in a very similar way than that the internet provided this democratized access to information. Similarly, crypto is a very interesting technology that provides democratized access to finance. And so basically, we believe crypto is a positive force in the world. Um, and so our role is to help accelerate its adoption.
Who are you?
Uh, who, my name is Brandon Millman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Atom. That's who I am in a nutshell.
Your handle on Twitter is B, Chillman.
Uh-huh.
Why?
Uh, that that's a good. I mean, yeah, I think when did I sign up for Twitter? It was like probably 2010 or 2011,
Mm.
and just was a funny joke at the time. My last name is Millman. Chillman rhymed with Millman, and uh, it stuck. And so, yeah, that's sort of the moniker I've been using. Yeah, on the internet for a while now.
How does that represent you? How chill are you?
Uh, I'd say overall, I'm pretty chill on the outside, but on the inside, maybe it's something different. But
Tell me
uh,
more. What's happening on the inside?
um, well, I mean, nowadays I'm running a pretty large scale company and business, and so I think, yeah, as much as I can provide this kind of like chilled out exterior to the company and to users and everything, and I think it helps. Uh, yeah, I think provide sort of like a stable foundation and base for, not just the company, but family, friends, etc. Um, but yeah, I mean, but on the inside, yeah, running the company is quite stressful. Obviously,
Mm.
navigating crypto is a 24/7, 365 game. So, um, but yeah, I think trying to take a beat and remain chill, so to speak, I think helps helps navigate that.
How do you deal with the stress?
Uh, that's a good question. I mean, um, well, one, uh, play a lot of tennis. I think that's a good one. You can just really smack the shit out of the ball, get some energy out.
Do you
Uh,
sometimes think about some colleagues or co-founders or clients or partners when you hit the ball?
I mean, yeah, when we lose a deal, I'm just like, just well, yeah, actually, often I'll play with my couple of our employees. Raj, shout out Raj, is always there to, uh, yeah, basically when something goes wrong, I'm like, Raj, get over here. We're smacking some balls around. So yeah, I mean that's just one way.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very nice. I'm a big tennis lover. I'm Swiss, so obviously I have to love tennis, right?
totally.
I
Yeah,
played a lot of tennis when I was 8 to 16 years old.
yeah. Indian Wells
Mm.
going on right now,
Mm.
just south of us, in Palm Springs.
You go watch tennis sometimes? Are
Uh
you that much of a fan that you would go?
Yeah, totally. I've been to the US Open before.
Mm.
But yeah, other than that, yeah, mostly, watching the all the highlights.
Mm.
You have like the extended,
Yeah.
the top level highlights, extended highlights, full match on YouTube. So
Which one do you go for?
extended is usually the good sweet spot.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like kind of like watching an episode of of TV or something like that. But I mean, yeah, tennis is like in a really
Mm.
interesting spot at the moment,
Mm.
as you probably know, in terms of a lot of new a lot of new kids on the block.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, don't know most of them, to be honest. I
yeah,
missed the wave.
yeah.
I had a bunch of guests who are very fans, like big fans of tennis, and they actually fly to Australia, even to Australia, to watch the Australian Open. Annabelle, shout out, is one of them. Annabelle
Mhm,
from Amber and
mhm,
Altius. There's a pattern across most of the very successful people I interview. they have a childhood trauma or something that happened in their life that gave them a chip on the shoulder.
Mm.
What happened in your life that might explain your hunger for success and your fire in the belly?
That's a good question. Can't say I ever really thought too much about it. I mean, I guess there's a couple things. I mean, early on in my career as an adult, I had the great fortune to work at Twitter, basically, from 2013, 2017. That was in a really amazing time to be in tech and basically be able to be a part of building an app that reaches hundreds of millions of people. Um, but I mean, through that time, there's Twitter went through a number of pretty interesting transformations. I think it the way it started is not really the way that it ended. Um, and yeah, I mean, basically, Jack Dorsey himself has said like he's always wished that Twitter was a protocol and not a product. And that's actually evidenced, I think early on there's a lot of excitement around building around like Twitter's developer API and open permissionless access to communication and um and human connection basically. And um interestingly that kind of all ended up getting ruined essentially by sort of the traditional web 2.0 ads monetization model. And so eventually that whole ecosystem had to get clamped down because Twitter had to basically harvest more eyeballs by forcing people directly into their main application.
Mm.
And so it's kind of this really interesting downstream effect that took many years to play out that actually ended up kind of destroying this very interesting open developer ecosystem. And so I think that was some of my early indications that I think the way that the tech industry had evolved was not necessarily in pure service to users and developers, but was more of this sort of like, yeah, more for and this monetized model. Uh, did that give me my chip on my shoulder? I'm not exactly sure, but it was a very interesting kind of insight and experience. Um, yeah, which I guess maybe was first in a couple of dominoes that ended up pushing me towards building Vanta.
Dear When Shift Happens family, the following message is probably the single most important thing you should take away from today's podcast. If you're serious about your crypto investing journey, please take some time to learn how to self-custody your assets to make sure that nobody can take your coins away. Ever. If you don't learn how to be your own bank, it is very likely that one day you will lose all your hard-earned crypto. The safest way to hold your crypto is in a cold storage that we also call hardware wallets. Hardware wallets are not complicated and they give you peace of mind. I personally use a hardware wallet called Trezor. It is open source, very easy to use, and the first hardware wallet created ever. As we like to say it in crypto, not your keys, not your coin. You can order your Trezor wallet with a 10% discount by following the link in the description down below and by using the promo code WSH10. And now, back to the episode. You said you worked at Twitter for 4 years.
Yep, 2013, 2017.
What's the one thing that you learned there that you could not have learned anywhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, basically cutting my teeth at building mobile apps and, you know, learning what true product and user experience is at like true scale, so hundreds of millions of people. And so, I mean, it's not the only place that I could have done to learn that, but it was sort of just it was one of very few
Mm.
that were sort of on the cutting edge during that time. And so, I do credit my time there as yeah, helping kind of contribute sort of the very like user first like ethos and mindset that we have today. Um, so yeah, that was quite interesting. And yeah.
How did you get so fascinated by the world of crypto and blockchain?
Hmm. Well, I guess there's a couple of things. So uh Well, one, yeah. So I went through this journey at Twitter. Um, Ended up becoming somewhat disillusioned with the way that, you know, sort of these big user products were built. Um, and
What's the reflection of and the actual result of that concretely? So you're saying I'm becoming disillusioned, but like what's the concrete problem? Is it for the users? Like what made you so frustrated?
well, I mean, originally it was just a little bit of being burnt out at. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. So one, there's very concretely there's this ads model, and it actually has these downstream impacts that are basically felt, all across the app. And so, when it, basically whenever you need to ship something at Twitter, and this is from the 2013, 2017 era, you'd have to produce an A/B test
Mm.
and show that, when you release this feature, it's not it's not, you know, at the detriment to any core metrics. And one of those core metrics being, uh, uh, you know, the monetization and revenue. And there's one very interesting experiment that I always come back to, which was, um, at Twitter for a long time, when you post a image, they would always like auto crop it to the same aspect ratio, this kind of like weird, like 16:9 ratio. And it would always kind of crop photos in this weird way. And this is during the time that Twitter was sort of duking it out with Instagram. And so obviously a very natural thing to increase and better the user experience for everyone is to say, hey, let's make the photos a bit more natural looking and, present them in their natural aspect ratio, which tended to make them taller, which tended to make tweets a bit taller. And what ended up happening is that in the A/B test experiment, turns out that when users are on an app, they they only scroll a finite amount before they get tired, right? And if each tweet gets a little bit taller and you're only scrolling a finite amount, then you're viewing less tweets, and therefore the company's making less money. And so this experiment, I think, was like developed and run for probably 9 months or something like that, only for it to never get released because of this sort of like final boss, which is like the revenue model. And so that was just so counterintuitive. Just like, obviously this is something that users want, that everyone wants, that makes the user experience better, and probably would have been a net positive for Twitter in the end, but could not get past this sort of checkpoint, which was like the A/B test model, and proving that it didn't detract from revenue.
What would happen if you went to Jack and told him, hey, this is because he's the founder CEO, right?
Mm.
Founder. But he's supposed to think differently. What would happen if you went to him, tell him, hey, this is the problem?
Well, I mean, so interestingly, when I was at Twitter, when I started, there was one CEO, this guy Dick Costolo, and then because of a lot of these issues, Jack ended up actually coming back
Back, yeah.
and doing this like dual CEO thing with like Twitter and Square. And yeah, I mean, the problem with the way that everything was constructed is that he can only do so much because although he is a core decision maker, he's not the only decision maker. There's a board. At that point, the company was public shareholders. You have to report revenue and everything. And so, although philosophically he may feel one way,
Mm.
he's not the only voice in the room, basically. So yeah, I mean that. I think after seeing that type of thing play out over and over again, I was like, well, like nothing gets done here, basically. And then, as we all know, that actually ended up culminating into this massive reset where Elon Musk is like, hey, like we're just resetting everything. It's becoming X,
Mm.
and all of that. And so yeah, I think that was one pretty interesting window into early window into kind of observing how like Web 2.0 models were sort of fundamentally broken. And then coincidentally, right around that time, 2017, when that was happening, that was when I discovered that's when white papers and ICOs and everything were kind of coming onto the scene. And interestingly, a lot of like those early white paper, you know, designs were describing things like Twitter on the blockchain or Uber on the blockchain, which like all of a sudden was like this completely different way of thinking about building apps on the internet, which is like in the Web 2.0 sense, more like these client server interactions. And sort of this in the blockchain world is more like these human peer-to-peer connections. And so that really started, I think, kind of like completely reframed the way that I think about applications and sort of just really got the gears turning again. And it's really interesting. And coincidentally, during that period of time, I had been living with one of my roommates, Jim Posen, who was a very early Coinbase employee from 2014, so very early on, um, and shout out Jim. And he was actually there to help me kind of explore some of these like early idea maze concepts, where I was like, hey, does this I'm reading about this in this white paper. Does this actually make sense? Or like, how close is this to what you're seeing, like at Coinbase and whatever? And so he actually really did help me kind of navigate, some of those early concepts because a lot of people, a lot of what people are writing at that time, obviously, vast majority of it was like random bullshit, but a lot of it was very interesting new ideas. And yeah, eventually he helped me get connected to the founders of ZeroX. Um, and yeah, that's ended up how I ended up getting connected with them and then, eventually joining them.
How do you avoid that phantom, something that happened in Twitter, which is you say your frustration of this would make more sense for the users, but this goes against revenue generation? Is it probably happening
Mhm.
one way or another?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in general, companies still very early on, you know, we have a lot of control over the company and we're not so quick to bring it to this sort of state where there's all sorts of board members and shareholders, et cetera. And so I think, uh, yeah, we're spending a lot of time sort of in this private stage, just making sure that, yeah, we're really iterating and experimenting, especially during this early stage of blockchain, um, to sort of figuring out what the right business models and interaction models are. And also part of it's also getting the right investors around the table, long-term investors around the table as well. So like A16Z crypto, um, paradigm,
Mm.
obviously. So those folks, those early folks are very long-term crypto, long-term thinkers. And so, yeah, part of it's just making sure that we're getting that right set of people around the table.
You left Twitter to work for ZeroX.
Yeah.
What was ZeroX? What is ZeroX?
Yeah. So ZeroX was one of, if not the first sort of breakout decentralized exchanges built on Ethereum. Um, it I mean, yeah, in 2017, there was a very interesting thing going on where the ERC20, you know, model was first explored and people were deploying all these different types of tokens. And there was sort of this new primitive born, which was like the token. And then the natural extension to that was needing some place to be able to exchange them, sort of the next primitive. And so ZeroX was responsible for building up very early decentralized exchange designs, which served as a primitive for exchanging tokens directly on the blockchain, which was a very, obviously, in hindsight, very uh, pivotal development because at that point, the only real the only real tool that people had to trade these things were centralized exchanges. And so And yeah, I mean, thankfully, due to Ethereum's, generic programmable design, these kind of new breed of exchanges were be able to be built. And so, yeah, that, 0x was exploring that concept from very early on.
I think you spent almost 4 years there too,
Hmm.
with your two co-founders of Phantom. Is that correct?
That's right.
They were there.
That's where I met Chris and Francesca.
What did your work at 0x help you understand about the Ethereum ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, so one, um, so yeah, had the great opportunity at 0x to build a number of pretty widely used crypto apps and technologies. And so, we built this decentralized exchange aggregation app called Matcha to XYZ, which a lot of folks in the Ethereum ecosystem use. Personally, I was responsible for the underlying backend technology called 0x API, which is a decentralized exchange aggregation engine, which is a lot of buzzwords, but basically means, there was a lot of decentralized exchanges that ended up coming out on Ethereum. 0x was one of many. Obviously, Uniswap was another, Curve, things like Cow Swap, Kyber, etc. And when a user wants to make a simple trade, um, you know, there's many different venues that they can do it, many different ways they can split up the trade, and then basically 0x API was sort of like a flight aggregator of sorts, would kind of help you aggregate all the different ways that you can make a trade and find like sort of like the optimal path and best price. And so anyway, yeah, so we were able to and that engine is still being used across the biggest swap platforms on Ethereum today. So um, MetaMask swap, uh, Zapper, and those types of things. And so, yeah, we had a very early, and yeah, gratefully we had this very early window into seeing how Ethereum technology had been developing. And yeah, one thing I realized pretty early on is that, you know the number one thing to inhibiting the adoption of everything was essentially the wallet experience. And I think we were all in that formative stage. We were all working on these different aspects of the technology. We were working on decentralized exchanges. You had folks working on lending markets and money markets. You had folks working on wallets, and just ended up realizing that wallets were sort of this ultimate entry point to the ecosystem. It was They were coloring a user's first time experience,
Mm.
like first impression with the technology. And if the wallet doesn't get it right, then it really basically provides like it basically causes this decelerating effect to everything that's happening in the ecosystem. And at that time, MetaMask had basically commandeered all the users of Ethereum and was basically applying this decelerating effect to everything.
How did you feel that? How did you feel this is actually decelerating the effect of adoption instead of accelerating because it's very early?
Hmm.
There's pretty much only Ethereum around, right? And there's probably not a million different wallets.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how do you feel that? Hey, or it's just like your gut feeling, thinking, hey, like we could go so much further if this was better.
Yeah, well, I think everyone at that time intuitively felt that and knew that, like, oh yeah, of course, this app is like the equivalent of like using like a browser page from like the 90s or something. Everyone knew that the UI and UX wasn't there intuitively, but because we were actually like I said, had the fortune of being able to build some pretty, I wouldn't say super global scale dApps, but dApps that had tens of thousands of users. We kind of got to that place where like, okay, hey, we have this kind of thing, we have this ball of momentum going with these apps. Let's actually now try to optimize them, try to understand how to grow them. And then, when you start to analyze like the funnels in your app, you think about the onboarding funnel. Like how does a user get from hearing about your app to actually like activating and onboarding to it. And once they're in there, how do they go from like intent, I want to trade, to actually placing and confirming the trade? And then once you start to once you start to map those things out, you end up realizing that every single funnel is constrained by the wallet experience, basically. When you onboard onto an app, you basically at that time, at at some point, you have to kick them over to MetaMask, and they have to basically ensure that the user's getting from like point B to C essentially, and then bringing them back to the app. And then similarly, when you're helping a user make a trade, you can only do so much before the MetaMask pop-up comes up, right? And then it's sort of on them to sort of hold up their end of the bargain and like, you know, finish that part of the funnel. And so you start doing that, and you end up realizing that those are humongous drop-off points when you actually start looking at the data. You know, 50 or 60% of people just end up dropping off, never coming back because they can't figure out that they need to put a different gas price or whatever, right? Like, or like the download like the onboarding experience didn't work because, you know, they got confused about what the seed phrase is or whatever. So, yeah, so, you know, we had this really interesting early insight as not just users who intuitively felt like the experience was bad, but also developers who were kind of had sort of the business was getting hindered by, you know, by this. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty clear cut thing for us that we saw that was happening.
But what was the concrete problem? The Ethereum blockchain, the programming language, Ethereum ethos, the
Mm.
mentality of the developers in Ethereum that was maybe very academic
Mm.
and less business driven. What was the problem that ultimately made you not only start a wallet, but start it on another chain?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you did hint at it there, basically. It was a basically failure of the Ethereum ecosystem to graduate from this purely developer-focused mindset to actually into this user-focused mindset. And so even today, I'd say MetaMask is and you know, most apps on Ethereum, frankly, are more geared towards like a very niche set of developers. Um, you know, even this concept of expecting a user to know what an RPC URL is and copy and pasting this link into the app in order to access, you know, a new chain is born out of that like ethos.
Mm.
And yeah, I think the ecosystem never really graduated from that. And
Why do you think that's the case?
um well, it's hard to reinvent yourself, I think, when you're waist deep in it. It's hard to be like, hey, they had a pretty decent thing going. They were getting a lot of users and all that, but I think it's when the good times are going, it's hard to say like, hey, we actually need to completely reinvent ourselves
Mm.
to like hit that like second leg. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think, you know, the Ethereum ecosystem also, you know, they took decentralization very seriously, and well, basically almost to a fault, where every single minute decision basically ended up uh, essentially ended up getting bastardized into this like EIP process where like XYZ random companies would all basically need to ensure that their opinion got heard before anything happened. And now, yeah, you still have like folks like Wallet Connect and whoever just like still battling it out on like random like ERCs and EIPs or whatever. While basically the entire industry is like
Mm.
moved to more to like this pragmatic and like performance based, um, like, ethos. And yeah, I think, it's really coming to a head now where, Solana's kind of surpassed Ethereum in a lot of different respects. Um, and now the whole Ethereum community is sort of figuring out what to do about it. And they're kind of on the back foot.
And we're in 2025, and you started to realize the early cracks already in 2017, 18, 19.
Yeah, I'd
Long
say
time.
2020, yeah, 2018, 2019. Yeah, kind of seeing that.
I had a Pedro from Wallet Connect on this podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Mhm.
And he said, basically, he said, I used to agree massively with the Ethereum decentralization, etc., that you need to decentralize max first. And then by building Wallet Connect, I realized when you build an actual company and product, that's not the way to go. The way to go is you cannot find PMF, product market fit, if you're decentralizing directly, because you're going to die before you find PMF. So you should basically find PMF and then decentralize later on, once you're kind of almost forced to. And he completely changed his mind. And I think a lot of people did. I mean, they kind of have to, because you see Solana and then you see the Solana approach, which is very kind of Silicon Valley startup approach, right? And then you see a bunch of apps on the top that are doing amazingly well, and you're basically forced to.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah, totally.
change your mind.
Yeah, I mean,
But there's still some people out there who aren't, which is impressive.
yeah, I think especially in these early innings of the technology where no one really knows what the right architectures are, what the right consensus mechanism is, whatever, you need to be able to, yeah, iterate very quickly, respond to feedback, um, and yeah, and progress the technology. And I think Ethereum did a really good job initially starting, painting a really huge vision and attracting a lot of very smart people to the broader crypto ecosystem. But yeah, I think it kind of really failed in this like iteration phase. And yeah, what ended up happening was like they sort of let a thousand flowers bloom, so to speak, and you had all sorts of random L2s and alternative L1s who were built on top of the EVM, trying different approaches. And everyone would have been better off just coordinating their efforts and, contributing to one shared vision, which is something I think Solana did very well.
Another thing you told me the other day when we talked was, and is linked to what you just said, which is you don't have to kid yourself that you have everything sorted out. And when you met Raj and Anatoly face to face, actually they told you that.
Mhm.
Like you told me, hey, like they were not kidding themselves that they had everything sorted out. Is this not something common in the crypto space?
Um,
Or was this not something common in the crypto space?
yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, it was not common. Well, and it goes back to that whole product market fit iteration concept. Like they just, we found that when we met them for the first time, their ethos and commitment to pragmatism was basically quite aligned with the way that we think about technology and we think about building products. Um and yeah, I mean that it their ethos really set the tone for the culture, and it was completely top down, and you see how the entire ecosystem now thinks. And yeah, I mean they were like approaching it as an engineering problem. And yeah, like I said, they didn't think that they necessarily had all of the right decisions out of the gate, but they were committed to iterating on it and improving it over time. Um, Whereas Ethereum, I think now as a community is sort of coming around to that and realizing, oh, hey, like this may not actually be the right design or right way to go about things, and now they're trying to change, but it's a bit unfortunate because they're just on the back foot now.
You started Phantom in 2021 as a multi-chain MetaMask competitor.
Mhm.
What's the very first thing that you focused on when you started?
Well, yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. So I mean, yeah, well, another thing that we had observed from this like early Ethereum period was that there was this other belief that if you were a developer or user, it'd be crazy not to choose Ethereum as your platform because it was otherwise it'd be too unsafe or too, there wouldn't be enough censorship resistance or anything like that. And um, the first thing that I saw that really challenged that notion was actually the advent of Binance Smart Chain,
Mm.
I believe in 2020, mid 2020. And they basically showed that, hey, they can cut some corners on decentralization, basically, and they can make something that feels faster and cheaper. And if you couple that with someone that has this distribution power like Binance.com, you could really kind of change and reshape the landscape. And that's exactly what happened. Almost immediately, it started getting picked up and gaining a lot of usage and all of that. And we saw internally at 0x, it really raised the question to the leadership there, should we support this or not? And that was a very interesting early signal that it was very likely that everyone's having that same conversation. And eventually it led them to adding support for Binance Smart Chain as like the first chain that wasn't Ethereum on the platform. And so that was an interesting insight, was that the world was very likely moving to this more multi-chain format because there was there was not enough supply, block space supply, to meet the demand of users. And so so yeah, the sort of two main insights, I guess, from my Ethereum experience is one, that the user experience and usability of the wallet was key to unlocking and accelerating the adoption of crypto. And then two, the world was very likely moving to this multi-chain format. And so we concocted our plan to, yeah, develop a multi-chain MetaMask competitor. But the interesting thing is that we didn't start off multi-chain, actually. We started off as um, a Solana, MetaMask of Solana, essentially.
Mm.
And that's the way we positioned the product in the beginning. And I say another key insight is that it actually, there were a lot of wallets that actually tried to challenge MetaMask during this like 2017 and 2020 period. There's like Balance Wallet, Rainbow Wallet, Argent, and all of these folks. And they all sort of took this approach of doing the obvious thing, basically, which was to compete with MetaMask on the basis of having like a better UX UI. Um, but what ended up happening was that it actually didn't really matter whether you were the second best wallet or third best wallet or whatever. It only mattered that you were the number one and like the pole position.
Mm.
And so whenever these crypto waves happen, whoever's in the pole position ends up benefiting the most and eating the most, basically, during those periods. And so what we strove to do, basically, when we started the company, was to develop our own pole position, essentially, on an up and coming ecosystem, and take this essentially huge levered bet on an up and coming ecosystem. And the original intent was basically to become the MetaMask of Solana, then reinvent ourselves and graduate to this multi-chain format, and then sort of attack Ethereum and MetaMask laterally, like in this lateral move instead of going upwards. And what we didn't expect was that the more time we spent in the Solana ecosystem, the more time we spent with developers there, that this actually might be the future.
Mm.
And then what ended up happening was like it all ended up culminating to today, where Solana is actually surpassing Ethereum in many different key metrics and areas. And yeah, although we did perform our conversions as multi-chain wallets, so Phantom, you're able to use Solana and Ethereum and Base and all these things. Yeah, Solana's our home and very much, where we are trying to push things forward.
Why did you choose to focus on Solana specifically? I believe late 2020,
Hmm.
but just actually before starting, you said we're going to focus on Solana
Yeah,
because there was a bunch of contenders on where to build this pole position.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so yeah, like I mentioned, there was Binance Smart Chain was the one venue. There was at that time Polkadot, Cosmos, um,
Avalanche,
oh
Terra.
yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to remember all the ones from that era. Yeah,
You
Avalanche.
could have chosen Terra, and the fate would have been basically the complete opposite.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I mean, undoubtedly there's an aspect of luck, but I think for Solana we saw a couple of pretty clear early signals. So one, from our time working like in DeFi at 0x, we understood that stablecoin liquidity is actually the lifeblood of financial activity on these ecosystems. And so we saw that USDC and Circle actually had taken a very early kind of position on Solana. And at that time, Solana was actually the number two biggest deployment of USDC at that time. So we're like, okay, the stablecoin liquidity is there. That's sort of like one piece of the puzzle. Second piece of the puzzle, for better or for worse, was having a very strong centralized exchange partner, because liquidity is one thing, but having people basically having some way for people to get frictionlessly get from the fiat world to the crypto world was also very important. And at that point, FTX was obviously very involved in the Solana ecosystem and prioritized, you know, having Sol support and having a very easy on ramp into Sol. And that was another big piece of the puzzle because it really removed all the friction from even more liquidity to get generated there. And so that was a big early observation.
So FTX is one of the reasons why you guys decided to focus. Not the main reason, but one of the reasons that you decided to focus on Solana.
I think, yeah, Solana
Mm.
having a very strong centralized exchange partner was key. I mean, at that point, Coinbase was sort of showing their hand as being very Ethereum aligned and prioritizing Ethereum basically whenever possible. Other ecosystems like Cosmos and Terra and those folks, they never had anyone like that. And so they would always, and even to this day, it's very difficult to get onto certain chains unless there's like a centralized exchange that directly natively supports them and supports their token ecosystems, right? And so you had FTX, who obviously at that point was uh, this up and coming star, and you know, and had direct support for Solana and tokens and everything. And so we viewed that as a very key pillar to the ecosystem. And then, yeah, I think thirdly is like what we already kind of touched on, which was identifying and resonating the most with the Solana founders and their ethos around pragmatism and all of that. So I think all of those things combined helped us push and feel confident enough to bet on Solana.
How much do you think that the fact that you live and work in San Francisco and that the Solana team does too, at least one of the co-founders, played a role in you trusting them more than other people? And we live in this industry where everything is online, Telegram, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. But the actual truth is, and I can see it when I interview, I'm here now in Silicon Valley, so I do everyone one after the other.
Yeah.
The overlaps between everyone is crazy. I work with this guy there. Uh, uh, my kids go to school with their kids. I'm invested in the 6 different of their company. I was in this fund before and now. It's just everybody knows each other, right? And so I feel like you're much more. And the same happens. I live in Singapore.
Mhm.
I'm pretty close to Jupiter and all these people. Like proximity is massive.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Mhm.
How much did just the proximity with Solana founders in terms of location play a role?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, yeah, at that point, both Raj and Anatoly were Silicon Valley based and SF based. And so, yeah, there was definitely an element of being able to meet them very early on face to face. Also I mean, this is also during COVID and all that. And so being able to actually make that like direct human connection, I think definitely also contributed to feeling that sense of trust with them. But I think even maybe one step further is that the ethos of pragmatism and being technology forward is a byproduct of being in Silicon Valley and having
Absolutely.
careers, having careers in technology companies and things like that.
Absolutely.
And so I'd say that's probably more of the common thread is that we all had upbringings, so to speak, during like peak Silicon Valley, essentially. And so all of those learnings and teachings and ways of building product are sort of encoded in the way that they thought. And same with us. And so
Mm.
I'd say that's probably maybe the common thread.
Absolutely. I had also 2 weeks ago, Yogo,
Hmm.
Yogo Monica
Hmm.
was at Twitter
Hmm.
and knows everyone. I was in the SWE office yesterday and they were all Facebook employees. Like you can feel it.
Yeah.
When you arrive in the office, you're like, fuck, the atmosphere here is incredible. And it's not even, I was talking to, I'm with a friend and I was telling him, I mean, obviously these people are working hard and very smart, but also that's how they were shaped.
Hmm.
They don't even have to reinvent everything. They saw like what was the culture at Facebook or at Twitter and
Yeah.
like and you can feel it, the energy. And they were just saying the Adeni and Evan were just saying, oh look, our office there. And this is the same as Facebook. The Facebook office, like look, that the same.
Yeah.
Right. And we just like reproduce the same thing. And then you have this atmosphere and this way of thinking and this practicality
Hmm.
that makes that literally created. I take my phone, all the apps, the 5 apps I'm using
Hmm.
every day
Hmm. Hmm.
are coming from here.
Yeah.
And Phantom is one of them. Like literally, you're right. So it's crazy. When you think about it, it's really crazy. And we were working in Palo Alto and we're just walking in the street, and this Palo Alto place is just a normal village. Right? You're just thinking like, oh man, I'm here. Like it's just a normal village with some building where you wouldn't even know that Facebook is there or SWE is there, etc. But they're there. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
You see the self-driving car and then you're like, oh, okay. You get reminded where you are. Yeah. On top of that, both my co-founders, they're also Silicon Valley guys, like Chris, very early Facebook employee, original designer on Facebook Messenger. Um, Francesco also worked at early Yelp. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a different culture for sure. And yeah, it's all about building and doing and sort of showing and not telling. I think that was all very encoded from the beginning. And yeah, I think that definitely had a piece to play in terms of why we chose Solana.
listening to your story, you say, we wanted to build a better UX, right? But the key factor was, and that made the difference with all the other wallets, was choosing an ecosystem, becoming pole position in this ecosystem. So most people might think, oh, these guys did an amazing job, but they were also pretty lucky to be in the right ecosystem. If I think a bit further, how much is Phantom one of the reasons why Solana succeeded and became that big?
Hmm. I mean, I think we had a huge role,
Mm.
definitely. Obviously, it's a whole ecosystem and group effort, but I think we did set the tone for the bar for usability and UX and UI on Solana. There was a very yeah, I mean, there was a very high bar for wallets. all wallets on Solana are, in my opinion, a lot better designed and a lot smoother and easier to use compared to Ethereum wallets. And I think that's partially because of the bar that we set. Yeah, like I said, a wallet is really a user's first time experience and first time. It sets the first impression when you use a new blockchain. And I mean, anecdotally, we just saw all of the reactions on Twitter. It's like, oh wow, it really just when you spent so many years using MetaMask and then you come and then you use Phantom and Solana combination for the first time, it just felt like almost like magic. And it's like, oh whoa, this is like how it's supposed to feel.
I'm not going back.
Yeah, exactly. And then it feels like, and then when people end up going back to MetaMask, like, whoa, it's like literally it's like being stuck in sludge or something. It's like, um, so yeah, I do think that first impressions really matter. And then that having that really clean first time experience really helped set the tone. And yeah, in general, I think we raised the bar as well for the entire ecosystem. So
What made the difference? So you said pole position in Solana. UX wasn't enough, but obviously you have to work on like amazing UX. What made a difference out of all the wallets out there for Phantom to become the most used wallet in crypto within 3 years?
well, yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about usability and UX and UI, but what really underpins all of that is just having a very user-centric mindset when building the entire experience. And what I mean by that is a user being a user first product doesn't just mean having a good UX UI within the bounds of just the app. And so that means it means having this user first mentality basically holistically across, many different vectors. And so there's the user's experience within the app, there's the user education, blog posts, safety tips, those types of things, the way that we communicate on Twitter, um, prioritizing customer support, and all of those things. Those are all parts of being very user centric and user first when building like when thinking about their user journey holistically, which I think most other wallets don't really think about,
Mm.
or it's a little bit of a afterthought. Um, and yeah, it's such a weird thing that in crypto, like it's sort of like the state of the art is to like of customer support is like, hey, go to the Discord and like figure it out basically.
Crazy.
And
Crazy.
it's really strange why that's the case when there's literally decades of prior learnings and experience that anyone can take from Web 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, where like, there's proven customer support models and everything. So, at Phantom, we had very, very lucky to actually have this guy, Dave Pasden, who leads our customer support function, one of the very first hires. And he actually used to lead customer support at MetaMask. And prior to that was running customer support at Coinbase. And he was actually able to help us see around all of the corners, basically, around like, hey, you need to have all of these systems in place so that when the waves come crashing down, you're not stuck in this like unlimited, like limitless backlog
Mm.
of users, right? So you have to set everything up in the beginning to be able to handle those huge waves. And that's a little bit of a theme in crypto in general is like the adoption comes in these like crashing waves where there's huge spikes of activity all coming at once. And if you can't really handle, if you don't have enough elasticity in all of your operations to be able to handle that, then you can fall behind very quickly. And so you even see that with like Coinbase today, like people are still waiting. They're like, oh, I'm waiting for this customer support ticket to get answered for months and all of that. And at Phantom, we treat customer support as a first class operation, has actual performance metrics like time to resolve the ticket, time to response, like the velocity of tickets that are being, handled. And I guarantee you, vast majority of products in crypto, like not even thinking about that at all. And to me, that's what it means to be actually like user first, and not just about UX UI, having some pretty colors, basically.
What is Phantom Wallet? If you had to explain it to your mom,
Uh, that's a good question. Well, okay, I'll answer that, but I think I also want to maybe take it a little bit further. Well, first of all, I guess I'd answer it by saying it is a consumer finance application
mm,
that helps you gain access to financial services on the internet. That's how I would explain it to my mom. I think a trap that a lot of people fall into in the crypto ecosystem is like, how can we how can we make this usable for my grandma, or how can we make this usable for previous generations? And honestly, the fact of the matter is, you know, your grandma is never going to use Phantom. And what we should actually be focusing on is the next generation, internet native age. Uh, who they understand memes, they understand technology. And so I think that's like a pretty common trap that I feel like people are like, "Oh, my mom's never gonna use this," or whatever. And, you know, I think that's fine. The new, Gen Z and beyond is very different internet native age who they're using apps like Square Cash and stuff as sort of their first financial experiences. So anyway, that's just a comment on that. But,
if you had to start Phantom again or a new crypto app in general in 2025, what ecosystem would you focus on to build this pole position that was so important for Phantom?
um, well, that's a good question. I mean, in general, the answer would be Solana, which I think at first sounds like a little bit of a lazy answer, but I basically don't think that another Solana is ever going to happen again. Uh, when a blockchain, when a new blockchain comes out, they have to capture a certain use case and narrative. And Solana really did a great job in capturing like the fast and cheap.
Mm.
We're the fast and cheap blockchain, right? No one is ever really going to be able to do that again, in my opinion. And so they're going to have to focus on other things like specifically on gaming or specifically on institutional or whatever. Solana also came up during a very specific time, you know, on planet Earth where COVID was happening. There was, obviously, um, uh, the whole interest rate phenomenon, et cetera. And so I think that in terms of timing and narrative, it's going to be very difficult to replicate what they did. And so I guess my my answer would be like Solana again. That being said, there's definitely some interesting new up and comers. Um,
You integrated Phantom with Sui, for example.
yes, Sui I think is a really interesting one. I think that their angle. Well, I think the Move ecosystem is interesting in general, and that similarly to Solana, which sort of had this like nerd sniping effect, where people would naturally gravitate towards Solana by virtue of smart contracts being written in Rust, and them finding Rust to be very interesting, have very interesting properties. Move also, you know, the Move ecosystem has something similar, where they can actually foster like a more genuine developer ecosystem around people who are really enthused and excited about Move as a language. What's interesting about that actually is that when Solana was up and coming, that was always used as like a reason why Solana will never work, because EVM had so much network effect. It was like EVM had so much tooling and mind share, and because of that, like there's no way a non-EVM blockchain would ever work. And interestingly, what ended up happening in reality was this opposite effect, where people who were interested in Solana were a lot more genuine. People who were interested, and all these EVM chains that were coming out after Ethereum actually attracted this type of person who was sort of like a copy and paste drive-by type of developer who would just like take Uniswap, copy and paste it onto Polygon or copy and paste it onto Avalanche just to do something quick. Yeah, Solana had this like early mantra of like developers chewing glass together, which I think, yeah, this sort of like shared trauma around, um, excavating this new technology really served to like form like a genuine like core of developers, which is extremely hard to replicate. I think Sui is quite interesting because they're trying to do something similar with developers. And so, yeah, I think we wanted to make a bet on the Move ecosystem in general. We chose Sui.
You mentioned before that at some point, the idea was always how do we attack MetaMask from the side?
Mhm.
Once we established the pole position in Solana, when is the right moment to go attempt to take over the larger player?
Oh, well, I mean, we're the larger player now. And we have been actually for a while, which is the interesting thing. But when we tried to do it, it was in 2023, and we had just yeah, we had started in 2021. There was this first arc of Solana, which was all about NFTs, and 2021 through 2022, we really were sort of like in this hand-to-hand combat phase with all the different wallets on Solana, and we had come out on top by the end of 2022.
How do you do that? How do you capitalize? Because there was this crazy price appreciation, obviously.
Mm.
I think 100x plus, right, of Sol in 2021. How much you capitalize on that moment before the bad stuff that happened afterwards that we're gonna obviously talk about in that phase? How did you manage to come at the top?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of it is this realization that you have to be in the pole position very early, and so getting there first was extremely important. I mean, at the time that Phantom came out, there was basically nothing on the market. It was just Solid. Um, you had Soulflare as well, but they weren't really a full app. It was just more of like a web experience. And so we were the first ones to really come onto Solana and have an extension-based wallet, which was actually another interesting insight. Going extension first was something that was non-consensus actually at that time. Most people were trying to go mobile first, on Ethereum at least. Um, so we were the first extension-based wallet to really be, uh, yeah, easily used with DeFi and NFTs. And so, yeah, a lot of it is attributable to grabbing that pole position first. But then second, yeah, I mean, we just uh, really had that user first mindset, uh, really focused on a lot of user first features or user first processes and operations. Like I mentioned, having very early on, having a very strong customer support function, very early on, building user safety user safety features. Transaction simulation is something that's like a industry standard now when you sign a transaction, but had not really been explored actually until we popularized it in 2022. And so, yeah, I think combination of those things helped us navigate that time. And then there's also at that time, 2022, most popular thing going on was NFTs. So having very strong NFT support. Um, it feels dumb to say now, but like just having NFTs automatically show up in your wallet was not the standard thing back then. Like, and so, and even having tokens automatically show up in your wallet. A lot of people don't forget, like in MetaMask originally, in order to have a token show up, you would have to actually manually add it.
Mm.
And so,
Still sometimes today.
yeah,
I mean, it's
that's,
written, hey, there is a new token identified, but you need to go and
yeah, which really, we just took the opposite approach where we would index and discover everything, which is actually still like a growing huge problem, but then get really good at applying sort of like spam filters and things like that,
Mm.
kind of like an email
Mm.
inbox. And so anyway, so yeah, 2022, we're able to yeah, ride the NFT wave quite well and really focus in and dial in the user experience. And so and release a mobile app very quickly was another thing. We were extension first, but then we just 4 to 5 months after we initially released, we were able to get a mobile app out very soon as well. And that was actually also pretty pivotal to um, riding the NFT wave effectively.
Mm.
Um, and so anyway, going a couple steps back and answering your original question of like when is the right time to go multi-chain. Once we went through 2022, we felt like we were in a pretty stable spot by the end of it. And then that's when we started to re-architect the app to build these like multi-chain features. That was 2022. And then sort of end of 2022, beginning of 2023 is when we really had some time to breathe. And we had been basically fighting all these fires and fighting off all these opponents and competitors. And, you know, a lot of Phantom at that point was being held together by like, sticks and chewing gum, so to speak. And then so now that we finally had a little bit of a breather, this like early 2023 era, I was like, okay, let's actually like refactor the app a little bit. And because our original plan was to uh, graduate from this like mono-chain wallet to multi-chain wallet, it's the perfect opportunity to build these multi-chain features. And so, yeah, that's when we felt was like the right time. So we had all this momentum, we had a chance to breathe. So we started building out all the multi-chain features early 2023.
you rode the crazy Solana 2021 wave, crazy price appreciation, NFT craze, and you managed to get out of that at the top position in wallets. But whatever goes up too quickly must come down quickly.
Mhm.
Career, business, stock, or even a crypto. Less than 2 years after you started Phantom, Solana experienced a life-defining crisis with the blow-up of FTX, one of the biggest Solana backers. Why did you stay?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was such a crazy time. And also it was just really unfortunate timing because I was just describing like the whole arc, right? Like at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, we finally had this breather where we could finally fulfill some of these original multi-chain plans. By the time that we were ready to release like multi-chain more broadly was literally at the end of 2023, like when all the development was like finished, and all of a sudden like FTX happened, right? Which is like just really unfortunate timing because we were like, okay, we just added support for Ethereum and Polygon, and Polygon being the most popular EVM chain outside of ETH-L1 at that time. And when we released it, it was basically right after the FTX implosion, and it was basically viewed as this like betrayal of Solana. So it's kind of a very difficult thing to navigate and just really bad timing. Because of course we were not of course it takes time to build this thing, right? It takes time to build out all this multi-chain infrastructure. It's not like FTX happened and then in a week we're like, hey, now we're multi-chain. So it was really bad timing. And that in itself was also something that we had to navigate. Um, and so, but why did we decide to stay? I think that fundamentally, I mentioned all of these things that we saw from Solana early on. I think all those fundamentals were still there. And although FTX, being this primary centralized exchange partner or player in the ecosystem, although that went away, I think that all of the other fundamental things that we saw, and especially in 2020, especially in 2022, it really became clear like, hey, this new, this, there's actually a new wave of people onboarding here. It's a completely different set of people that were on Ethereum because it was faster and cheaper. It was literally a completely different demographic that was being onboarded, and we saw those signals really early on. Um, and yeah, folks who can't afford to pay $50 to $100 of gas fees on every transaction, right? It just unlocked this like brand new set of users, and we saw that firsthand. So that, on top of all of the fundamentals of Solana not changing.
How do you see that these are new people? If there's no KYC, you don't know exactly who your customer is. Like, how do you know that? I mean, it makes sense. It's logical, right? But how do you concretely? You're a very data-driven person, from what I understand. Probably, I mean, we talked about that before, right? Even
Mhm,
at Twitter, you were looking at the data. Even at 0x, you're like, hey, look, we're losing 50% of the people here because of MetaMask.
mhm.
How do you know this is a new type of people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was just the behavior, their behaviors. I mean, it was a completely different type of behavior, and the sort of people buying sort of like the lower market cap NFTs, and it was just something that was just not
Mm,
happening on Ethereum, and it was something completely different. And so you're right, we didn't. It was hard to prove that it was a completely different segment because, in our eyes, they're just addresses and transactions happening on the blockchain. But the type of behavior was just completely different. And it was also a lot more mobile first in a way that Ethereum never really
mm,
had. And so, and then it also was, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence as well that, folks that we knew, they had they had a cousin who had like someone at work who was getting into Solana NFTs and stuff. So a lot of the signals were there. Um, but yeah, like I said, it was not only that, but it was also the fundamentals of Solana not changing. I think just gave us a lot of conviction to double down. And something that was very interesting that happened post FTX with Solana was that it was sort of like this mass purging event where everyone who remained were like all of the true believers, so to speak.
mm.
And again, that formed like a really genuine core in which today's ecosystem is built. So like a lot of the, I mean, I guess you can call it a lot of the weak hands, quote unquote, got washed out, and then a lot of like the true believers stayed. And yeah, that actually formed the basis of like the very strong community that we see today, which is kind of interesting because yeah, FTX was always framed as this mass this extinction event at that time, but actually it was sort of like this purification test of some
Mm.
sort where like only the true believers stayed. So it's kind of interesting.
You said sometimes, I mean, in entrepreneurship in general, but in crypto is so crazy that it hits even more. You say we have to find a reason to keep going. You have an example or two where you kind of got to this point where you were, I'm not going to say near abandoning, but where you were kind of questioning what you're doing.
Hmm.
which I think we all do
Yeah.
every now and then.
I mean, yeah, FTX was a big one. I
Mm.
mean, that one was like being like in a slow motion car crash for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was just like, whoa, like we were like on fire for so long, and then it literally just all
Mm.
came crashing down. And that was like that one was crazy because I was literally at Solana breakpoint when that was happening, or like I was, and like there was like the public fighting between CZ and SBF. And I was like, no one like really knew what was going on. And then like in the plane ride back, I was just like, whoa, like this is like getting crazy. So yeah, I mean FTX was definitely, one of those moments. But yeah, I mean I think it all comes back down to trying to achieve this mission, which is to accelerate the adoption of crypto, genuinely believing that crypto is a positive force for good in the world. Um, and one of the side effects of being a permissionless and open ecosystem is exactly that. There's so many different things going on
Mm.
and so much experimentation going on that there's good parts, and there's bad parts. It's kind of a double-edged sword to being a permissionless open ecosystem. Early internet is exactly the same.
Mm.
And so I think our role is to really just help users navigate that world, keep them safe, and keep them, yeah, basically keep them safe as they're exploring. Basically, very akin to how the browser's role in on the web, or even an email client, like like Gmail. If you look in your spam folder, it's like cesspool, right? Like there's all sorts of people trying to scam you and phish you or whatever. But they did a really great job just taking this open permissionless protocol and, developing a safe and easy experience on top of that.
Mm.
And then obviously email completely changed the way that people communicate and arguably, propelled human society. And so, yeah, just, going back to that original mission and just, truly believing that crypto is a force for good. I think that's one of those things that keeps the entire team going.
You said at Phantom, we believe that crypto is a huge positive force in the world, not just a new age 24/7 casino.
Mhm.
What makes you wake up every day and go to the Phantom office?
Well, I mean, yeah,
How do you explain to someone who is like, this is just a casino 24/7?
mhm.
And you guys are a huge role in facilitating that casino. How do you explain someone who sees the crypto industry pejoratively in a bad fashion and explain them or evangelize the huge positive forces in the world that it can bring?
Well, nowadays it's actually a lot easier to do that because of what's happening outside of this, crazy casino aspect, which is there's literally all the infrastructure around stable coins, massive fintechs getting into crypto, like all of that is very clear evidence that there is something greater here. There is this broader internet scale finance system, internet native finance system that's being built. And we're actually finally seeing that end of the tunnel, like light at the end of the tunnel
Mm.
today. Because during all of these, basically during each one of these speculative waves, like 2017, 2020, um, 2017 was ICOs, 2020 DeFi summer, 2021 NFTs, 2025 and 2024 meme coins. During each one of those waves, huge amount of capital and users come into the system, and infrastructure gets built, roads, public goods, etc. And each time that happens, we get a little bit closer and closer to realizing sort of like this final vision of sort of quote unquote true utility of crypto. And I think for this last wave, a number of step functions got realized. So the emergence of Solana, and faster the true culmination of a blockchain that is fast and cheap enough for the vast majority of people on Earth to use, and especially on a mobile form factor as well. That's a huge thing that happened in the last wave, was that crypto on mobile got unlocked. And on top of that, there's technological infrastructure, but there's also financial infrastructure. Stripe, buying Bridge,
Mm.
getting into stable coins, leading the way for other fintechs. Like the true, finally, the true vision of having this US backed, US dollar backed cryptocurrency where you can take it, pay for coffee with it, pay for things on the internet with it. That's like finally
Mm.
happening now.
Mm.
And so, I mean, why would we stop now? Like that's what's happened. That we're like basically on the precipice of achieving that.
You mentioned crypto getting really big on mobile apps. In late November 2024, Phantom became one of the most downloaded apps in the App Store, ahead of WhatsApp, Instagram, I think just behind ChatGPT. So basically ahead of many other big Silicon Valley and San Francisco big names. How did that feel?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a crazy moment. Yeah, I think we hit like, I don't know, number 3 or number 4, like on the iOS App Store. And yeah, I mean, it was very validating in some sense because it's like a very objective measure that you can show anyone
Mm.
else, anyone who doesn't know about crypto or your mom or whatever. And it's very clear, like, the adoption is there. Um, so yeah, I mean, it felt awesome, felt validating. Um, I don't know, much more than that. It was great.
How much did that help you think much bigger in
Hmm,
terms of what's possible for crypto and for Phantom Wallet?
yeah. Yeah, I think it did open my eyes in terms of, wow, we do have this massive distribution.
Mm.
Like people all across the world, many different countries are downloading Phantom. And Phantom is actually truly a global phenomenon. And we actually have this very unique opportunity in front of us to actually evolve into you know, the next mass market consumer finance app. Um, in a way that other traditional finance consumer apps can't really
Mm.
do. Like Square Cash, Venmo, Revolut, Robinhood to some extent, they don't have access to the same sort of global audience that we do. They don't have access to the same sort of open permissionless networks that we do. And so, yeah, I think that really did put into focus, like, we actually have the distribution to make that final leap to start competing with, the big boys, basically.
So people would go on the App Store and would see ChatGPT, Instagram, WhatsApp, and then they would see this app with a phantom on the top.
Mhm.
Where does the logo and the name come from?
Uh, yeah, that's a good story, actually. It, the name Phantom is actually derived from MetaMask. There's actually a direct connection there where my co-founder and I basically, actually not too far from here, we're walking down Mission Street, basically, and we had been ideating about this concept of building a MetaMask competitor. And I think we were a couple drinks in, and we were just riffing off of different concepts, right? And so we had this visual of like, hey, we have to remove the mask from, like, we have to demask the ecosystem. Like we have to like remove the mask and see what's behind the mask, or whatever. And I think then my co-founder just said, "Oh, Phantom of the Opera," and I was like, "Oh, Phantom is a really good name." And then on the spot, I just like looked up, hey, is phantom.com available? Which the answer was no. Although we have phantom.com now, which is another story. But phantom.app was available, and I was like, that's a perfect domain. I literally bought it like right there. So that's actually how the name was derived. It actually comes from MetaMask, which is interesting. And then the logo is also interesting because the logo that we have today is actually not the logo that we started with.
Mm.
The logo that we started with was designed by my co-founder, Chris, who is a designer by trade. He just quickly put something together in Figma, and that was what was the original ghost that looked like a little bit more like a chat bubble. Um, and so that was the original icon, and then the icon that we have now, the logo, is actually basically coincided with a little bit of a reinvention of the company. Coincided with, hey, we went from this mono-chain wallet to multi-chain wallet. We wanted to just basically give the entire brand a new foundation to be able to have like a very unique identity and unique like visual style. And so it was that during that time that we started experimenting with new logos. And it was actually very controversial because I was like, obviously we had already gone through 2021, 2022 with the old logo.
Mm.
And we already had this brand recognition. And my co-founder, Chris, he was like, we should up level our brand and develop this new logo.
Mm.
I was like, that seems really risky, but I trust you fully. And ended up being the right move because now it's a lot more very iconic and a lot more visually distinct. So anyway, that's like a little bit about the logo and name.
Earlier this year, you raised a huge funding round of $150 million at a $3 billion valuation. Why?
Well, it kind of goes back to a little bit what I was talking about earlier, which is, well, part of it is in crypto, you want to survive for as long as possible. And in my opinion, you can never acquire too many resources or raise too much money. And so, you know, we wanted to secure ourselves, secure the company, and build enough of a war chest so that we can always remain long-term thinking. Second is we do have these aspirations to like complete this sort of second leg and transformation into global consumer finance platform. And we want to bring all of the biggest players and investors onto the table. And so we brought in, Sequoia was the lead for the round. Sequoia's legendary Silicon Valley investor, uh, responsible for pretty much all of the consumer finance apps you know today. Robinhood, Nubank, all these guys. And so they were the perfect sort of like new blood to get into the company to actually fulfill like this next leg. So it's part strategic, part securing the company in terms of resources and yeah, just making sure that we can always remain super long-term thinking no matter what happens.
You said before, Phantom has a huge advantage when compared to these finance apps that you want to disrupt, such as Robinhood and Revolut. Phantom is built on the top of crypto. It is open and permissionless. What does this mean if you had to explain it to a Robinhood user who doesn't understand much about crypto?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think so. One, I'd say to a Robinhood user, I'd say basically it gives them access to financial tools and investment opportunities that they would not normally have access to.
Hmm.
To a Robinhood user, that would sort of be the angle. It's like, so what is a Robinhood user trying to do when they download a Robinhood? It's to access basically new investment opportunities. And so for Phantom, we bring a whole new world, not only the existing ones that they're used to, like a whole new world of potential investment opportunities. And that's how I'd position it to like the prototypical Robinhood user.
For example, what would you tell a Robinhood user? Because Robinhood is doing a massive push with the crypto, right?
Yeah.
But what would you tell them? Hey, look, like this is you have access to this range of opportunities, but look, with us, this is how much bigger this range of opportunity is.
Yeah, well, it's not only about bigger, but it's also about being there first, which is also a big aspect of
Mm.
investing or trading. You want the alpha, so to speak. You need to be there first. The way that Robinhood and even Coinbase is set up is that they're always trailing behind. Just yesterday or something, like they added like peanut coin or these various meme coins. And I'm like that. Those are like
A month late, right? You're many months late.
not even a month. Yeah, like almost
many
a
months,
year.
yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, so it's very clear to any Robinhood user that if they do want access to these new things, whatever they might be, Phantom is the only way to basically access the bleeding edge.
Mm.
Um, so that's sort of one of uh, the main like positives for Phantom.
You go as far as to say that Revolut and Robinhood just can't compete with Phantom. And I was thinking, I know Ben from Bybit, for example,
Mhm.
are the top exchanges out there. I know the guys from Jupiter really well. And when the Trump coin launched, I really understood on-chain power.
Yeah.
In terms of how fast, right? Exactly that. And I started to think in my mind without telling it, these centralized exchanges are finished. I mean, obviously, it's probably not going to happen as quickly as I might think, whatever, or maybe it's not true.
Mhm.
But if I think very, very simplistically,
Yeah.
if more and more people understand on-chain power and faster access, right? Everything else, given a long term like frame enough, right? Is finished.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
No, yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's definitely the case. Like centralized exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken or whatever, they made the right choice for them at the time that they were built.
Mm.
The raw blockchain was very difficult and very hard for a normal user to use and expensive. And to use Bitcoin, you have to wait 6 confirmation blocks and all this kind of stuff. And so they're like, hey, let's just like abstract all of that away and create this and package it up in this like centralized experience where we can hide all the details, right? That was the perfect choice for them.
And for the industry as a whole.
Yeah. To be able to get people to bootstrap the ecosystem, so
Yeah.
to speak. But now the number of tokens appearing on chain is exploding. And centralized exchanges have this like, they're basically like, have like a pickaxe where it's like, versus something more, versus having the bow and arrow or whatever, right? Like they have this very one-dimensional tool, which is like an exchange and like listing tokens onto the exchange. That's the only tool that they have to compete. Obviously, Coinbase has evolved, and now they have Base and Coinbase Wallet and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an old paradigm, and now they have this new paradigm. There's this new paradigm where you basically have to go from you have to transform from listing to indexing, basically, where you have to act as a tool that actually discovers and indexes new tokens as they come because they're coming out so quickly. And so, yeah, it's if they are not able to transform themselves, they're not going to be able to compete. And because of all the network effects involved in these like open permissionless networks, it just becomes like this sort of like avalanche, essentially. So yeah, I mean, I think that, that's something that we saw very early on at 0x as well. Like 0x's whole vision was that there was going to be this world where like there's millions of tokens flowing freely from point A to point B. And, the only way to be able to navigate that world is with decentralized exchange. And that is actually literally happening right now. And so, but yeah, so yeah, you see like Robinhood's like basically struggling to list new tokens in a timely fashion, and they have to completely change their model, which is very hard to do to completely reinvent yourself as a company. So,
Your ultimate goal is at Phantom is to eat TradFi.
hmm.
What does that mean?
Yeah, basically that means, well, it means it's sort of multidimensional. It means fulfilling some of the initial vision of crypto, where it's actually a complete alternate finance system to the traditional finance system. Help actually promote its growth and promote um, sort of this network effect that I've been describing, where you have this open permissionless network. There's so much activity and so many users and developers that TradFi, so to speak, can't really compete. Um, it also means taking the things that people normally use, taking the jobs to be done that people use TradFi for and doing them better. So sending money from point A to point B, interacting with businesses, getting access to new investment opportunities. Like everyone's going to end up discovering that those jobs to be done are much better served by crypto. And so that's what I mean by eating TradFi is basically the the things that people are trying to get done that they normally reach for Square Cash or Robinhood. Eventually, they're going to reach for Phantom to do that first.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy.
What makes you happy?
Uh, oh God, I mean, I think, yeah, making huge impact, building something. I think, I've always been a builder and tinkerer, and building something that a lot of people use and recognize makes me happy and brings me fulfillment. Um, and yeah, I think being mission oriented, actually working towards this long term vision, that makes me happy, amongst other things. Those are all the work related ones. But
What's your biggest prediction for the next 24 months?
oh, 24 months. Well, we're going to see a lot of stable coins come out.
Mm.
I think we already see that precipitating. I think we're going to see some interesting downstream effects of that happening. I think things are probably going to get quite confusing in the world of stable coins. Very similar to what happened with L2s. I think the dynamic is very similar, where all of these companies and apps got pitched on, hey, you're going to build your own L2 and you're going to be able to make all this money off of it, right? Now, stable coins have kind of taken that role. It's like, hey, company XYZ, like you're going to release a stable coin and you're going to make all this money off of it, right? Look at USDC and Circle. And then all of a sudden, like all these companies are going to start issuing stable coins and it's going to get really confusing. So I feel like in the next 24 months, you'll probably see all of these come out, and then you'll probably get like this like peak confusion, and then probably you'll then end up consolidating to be winners, say. Um, so I think that's going to happen. I think we're actually going to finally see the realization of payments enabled by crypto. Well, there's two different types of payments. There's peer-to-peer payments, which we're going to be working really hard to enable, like sort of like the crypto Venmo vision. And then there are crypto like user to merchant payments, like actually buying goods and services with crypto. I think that world is finally going to get realized thanks to Stride. Like that world has traditionally been pretty hard to crack because merchants don't really know what to do with crypto and they don't know how to deal with it. And so you really needed that last leg for someone to be able to convert crypto into like normal fiat for merchants to accept. And Stripe's playing that role now with their pay with crypto efforts. And so I think finally we're going to see that world come to fruition. Um, so yeah, I'd say 20. There's a couple 24 months.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for doing that. Thank you for spending all your days and sometimes nights to bring this industry further and to be so practical. Sounds simple, but it's so necessary. Like we talked about that before. There's too many people who are, I mean, it's a very tech driven and developer driven industry, and there's too many people who still seem to not really understand that users need simplicity.
Mhm.
And it's something that you really nailed. And the reason why millions of users, me included, use Phantom a lot. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.